Sit with your back straight. Back straight, body relaxed, mind relaxed, eyes open. Stay with your mind wherever you think it may be. And ask yourself, what can the mind be conscious of right now? What can the mind be conscious of right now without getting caught up in thoughts? Don't dwell on any one particular object to the exclusion of everything else. You can place your mind, your attention in one place, and yet be open to whatever comes into the mind's field of awareness. Even as I talk, you can still be conscious of how the mind is responding to what you hear. But pay full attention to the talk so that you can understand what it's all about and how the instructions can be put into practice. Today's talk is about the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And this talk could have been given right at the beginning, or yesterday, or even tomorrow, if we have time. But since it is good in the beginning, middle, and end, I can give this talk anytime. And therefore I talk about it today. And what is that thing that is good in the beginning, the middle, and the end? But Sati, sampajanna, remembrance and clear knowing, or to use a popular translation, mindfulness and clear comprehension. We already talked about the 4 R's of Sati yesterday. Can you remember? Can you recollect? Can you remind yourself? And you look back at what's happening to your mind. So these are the 4 R's. Remember while you're listening or reading. Recollect after you finish with that, when you get up from that place. And remind yourself to put what you have learned and remembered into practice. And part of that instruction is to look back at your mind. Look back at what had just happened, at your senses, or even more important, at how the mind relates to what comes into its field of awareness. You also need to look back to verify what you have learned. You have learned all conditioned phenomena, all constructions are characterized by arising, persisting, changing, and subsiding or passing away. When you perceive this arising, persisting, and passing away, you can interpret it in terms of impermanence, in terms of suffering or unsatisfactoriness, or in terms of not self. The characteristic of conditioned phenomena of sankhara or sankata dhamma is that they arise, persist, change, and pass away. But how you interpret it depends on the perspective that you are looking from. And it also depends on the individual. Some people look at these characteristics of conditioned phenomena and they can see it impermanent, changing all the time. Some people can look at it as very unsatisfactory because there's nothing you can cling on to and hold on to, no security. Some people look at it like, oh, it's not me, not mine, not myself, because everything is changing due to causes and conditions. So this is what you learned, you heard, or you've read, and you remember, and you recollect. And you have to remind yourself to try to verify that experience. And there are various levels of verifying that. You can do it in a very gross and conventional level when you see people sick, going old, dying, children suffering, people because they cannot get what they want. These are all very gross manifestations, conditioned phenomena. What is more subtle are the pleasant feelings, pleasurable feelings that arise due to sense experience. When you are enamored by these pleasure of these sense experiences, you'll get caught up in the gratification and you don't see the drawbacks. You can only see the drawbacks when you realize that they are not permanent. Not only eventually will these feelings pass away, but they are actually momentarily arising and passing away. And in order for us to really understand and experience the drawbacks of these pleasant feelings, we need to look back continuously, as often as we can. Then only we be able to escape from being lured by them. The escape is when you see that all these pleasant feelings don't last very long and they are just very transient. Then you begin to understand that no point desiring, running after them, going through so much trouble and undergoing so much suffering and hassle just to experience these few moments of pleasant feelings. So that's when you understand the escape and you're able to discipline and eventually subdue and abandon desire. So all these comes from the 4 R's. You read about the theory, you remind yourself to practice, and then you look back continuously to verify that. Now, what has this got to do with sampajanna? Clear knowing, full comprehension. What I just said just now is actually a combination of sati and sampajanna. Why? Because sati's function is only to bring a past object to the mind's attention, whether it's a distant past, an intermediate past, or an immediate past object. That's all. There's no wisdom in sati. Sati, as I said, is a refuge of the mano, the mind, and it is universal. It is found in all animals. It is not necessarily wholesome. It is essential for the survival of the organism. In fact, sati can be an immoral property, and it is only wholesome or unwholesome depending on what it does, depending on what mental states it is associated with. Even a sniper, even a robber, even a terrorist depends on sati to remember instructions and to remember how to carry out his operations to be successful. That is also sati. To remind himself to always be on his toes, to look around and make sure that nobody is suspicious of what he's doing. That also requires mindfulness, remembrance, reminder, looking back. After sati has done his job, after he has brought a past object to the mind's attention, then sampajanna, or clear knowing, takes that object and investigates it, understands it, based also on sati, because sati is what you have heard, all this second-hand knowledge, and together with sampajanna, or clear knowing, they both verify what was heard. Sampajanna cannot do without sati. Sati without sampajanna does not have wisdom. So sampajanna, or clear knowing, or clear comprehension, depends on sati to inform it so that it can work. Also to bring the object to its attention. And that object is not only the immediate past object, but also past learning. My understanding of sati and sanya, or mindfulness and perception, is that mindfulness is volitional. It is willful memory. But sanya is spontaneous memory. But sanya can be conditioned. It is also a conditioned phenomena. Initially, you need willful memory to memorize something. And after some time, when it gets embedded into your consciousness, it becomes sanya. Yeah, it becomes spontaneous memory. It's like, for example, initially when you start to learn Arahang Sammasambuddho, you have to pay very close attention. You have to try to remember the tune, remember the rhythm. And when you first learn it, your mind is not easily distracted because you are intent on wanting to memorize it. But after you have mastered it, you can chant Arahang Sammasambuddho 100 times, but your mind will be going all over the place. Because from sati, it has turned into sanya. It has become spontaneous memory. But because it is so automatic, the mind can do other things at the same time. Because the mind is so fast. That's why the Buddha often tells the monks develop the perception of anicca, impermanence, develop the perception of not self, of suffering, of non-beauty, and so forth. Perception, although is not volitional, it can be conditioned by sati and effort. Why do I regard sati sampajanna as something, a dhamma that is beautiful in the beginning, the middle, and the end? Because sati sampajanna is found in the gradual training template. The gradual training template is a step-by-step practice for monks and nuns. It is a sort of a default, gradual, step-by-step, graduated training for monks. It starts off with your precepts, trying to observe your precepts, and then guarding your senses, your sense doors. And then it goes on to knowing moderation in eating, then to wakefulness, and then the next step is sati sampajanna, mindfulness and clear comprehension, mindfulness and clear knowing. After that, you go and look for a secluded place, you overcome the hindrances, and then you practice the jhanas. So this is pre-jhanic training. This is a very elementary training. Sati sampajanna is important right from the very beginning. And then, after one has abandoned the hindrances temporarily and developed the jhanas, in the third jhana, sati sampajanna becomes very prominent. The third jhana is characterized by mindfulness and clear knowing. Even before doing the jhanas, because the jhana is samadhi, and the basis for samadhi is mindfulness, the four satipatthanas, the four establishments of mindfulness. In the four establishments of mindfulness, also we have sati sampajanna. In fact, it is found not only in the Satipatthana Sutta, in all references to the Satipatthana formula. Because when the Buddha talks about the four Satipatthanas, he would always use the standard stock phrase. And that is, he would say, here a bhikkhu dwells contemplating the body in the body, or feelings in the feelings, mind in mind, mental objects, immental objects, ardent, clearly knowing, mindful, having subdued likes and dislikes in regard to the world. So this is the standard formula. When you want to practice the 4 establishments of mindfulness, you must be ardent, you must have mindfulness, you must be clearly knowing, and you must have subdued likes and dislikes in regard to the world. Not only in any one, but in everyone. There are places in the suttas where the Buddha talked about the linear development of the Noble Eightfold Path. You start from right view, and then step by step you go on to right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, leading to right samadhi. Mindfulness is also a basis for samadhi to be developed. In the process of developing the 4 establishments of mindfulness, you also need to have mindfulness and full awareness, or full clear knowing. And then finally, even after one has become an arahant is also possessed of mindfulness and clear knowing. So that's why it is beautiful in the beginning, the middle, and the end. It is useful in all levels of the practice. There are 2 suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the Satipatthana Samyutta, and both of them are called Sati Sutta. One is in the beginning, and one is in number 2, and the other one is number 35. In that second sutta, in that Samyutta, Sati Sutta, sampajanna is defined as sampajanakari, acting in full awareness. What does that mean? The Buddha says, when one is walking towards the front, or one is walking, turning around to walk back, one does so, one acts with full awareness. When one is looking ahead, or one is looking to the back, one does so with full awareness. One acts with full awareness. When one is stretching one's arm, or retracting it, one does so with full awareness, or clear knowing. And this goes on for all the physical activities in your daily life. When you hold your bowl or the ropes, and when you eat, when you chew, when you swallow, or when you drink, when you defecate, when you urinate, whatever you're doing, you are supposed to do so with clear knowing or full awareness. But what is meant by clear awareness? You're supposed to do all these things, act with clear awareness, but it is not really defined in this sutta. So in the sutta number 35, the Buddha asks again, how does a monk live or dwell clearly knowing? Then he says, here, to a monk, his feelings, thoughts, and perceptions are known as they arise, known as they persist, and known as they subside. Here is a more definite description of what sampajanna is. When you talk about acting all these physical activities with sampajanna, it means that you are doing all these physical activities after having watched your feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. Because your feelings, thoughts, and perceptions influence your physical action. You act because of your thoughts, your feelings, and your perceptions. So when you say act with full awareness, or full clearly knowing, it means that you act, you walk, you stretch your arm, you bend your arms, you eat, you drink, you speak, you keep quiet, you stand, you walk. Whatever you do so clearly knowing what is going on in your mind, your feelings, your thoughts, your perceptions. This is what the sutta says, and this is how we can deduce from these two sutras. The commentaries, however, give us another set of explanations for sampajanna, clear knowing. It says that there are 4 aspects of sampajanna. One in Pali is called sattaka sampajanna, clear knowing or full awareness or clear comprehension of purpose or benefit. The second is called sappaya sampajanna, clear comprehension or clear knowing of suitability. The third is called gochara sampajanna, or clear comprehension, clear knowing of resort or domain. And the last one is called asammoha sampajanna, which is clear comprehension of non-delusion. Okay, so to go over the 4, the first one is clear comprehension, sampajanna of purpose or benefit. The second is suitability. The third is resort or domain. And the fourth is non-delusion. How do the commentaries further explain this? They say that, well, before you walk forwards, before you look ahead or stretch your arm or whatever, you have to look at your mind, your intention. What purpose does it serve? By going or not going, by eating or not eating, by speaking or not speaking. The first thing is to watch your intention. What's the purpose? What's the benefit of doing so? Now let me explain each of that first, and then I'll give examples. The second is sappaya, is suitability. Before you eat also, you consider whether it's suitable for you. And before you go anywhere also, you consider whether going there is suitable with respect to what you're doing. Because all these are connected with cultivation. So when you say it is purposeful, it is beneficial, you will relate that to meditation. The next one would be gochara. Gochara here, translated as resort or domain, refers to actually your meditation subject. Whether you're doing samatha or vipassana, whether you're doing the kasina or the breath, or whether you're doing open awareness, whatever you're doing, make sure that you don't lose it. Be continuous in your practice. That is your domain. That is your resort. The mind is supposed to resort to that object, and you're supposed to maintain it. Be continuous in your practice. And asammoha, the last one, this one is more in terms of looking at things, or verifying anicca, dukkha, anatta, and conditionality. Clear comprehension. This one is really, you could say, insightful wisdom. Number 1 and number 2 could be just worldly consideration, wise consideration. Number 3 is actually about being continuous in your practice. And the fourth one is actually about insight, because it is about seeing anicca, dukkha, anatta, and seeing conditionality. To give some examples, the commentary says that if a thought arises in a yogi's mind that he wants to go and pay respect to a stupa, is that beneficial? It's beneficial, right? I mean, it's part of the practice. You go to the stupa, you have a lot of faith and inspiration, and that could encourage you to practice more. People like to go to certain Buddhist pilgrimage sites, and they say that they feel a lot of very good energy. They get there and they sit down and they can become very composed very quickly. So the good energy there, or whatever that is inspiring and can help you in your practice. So that may be something that is beneficial and purposeful. If this thought arises in that yogi, want to go and see a stupa, you must ask yourself, why? What purpose does it serve? Is it beneficial? If it's beneficial in the sense that it will help you in your practice, then go. But secondly, although it may be beneficial to go to the stupa, it may not be suitable because they're having a festival there. They're having a festival there are thousands of people, got men and women all dressed all nicely. If you're a yogi, you go there, you'll be distracted. They'll be blaring away loudspeakers, there might be whole night chanting and all that. Although the purpose is good, is beneficial to go, but not under such circumstances. So it's not suitable. So then you don't go because it's not suitable. And the third is gochara, whether by going will you be able to maintain the continuity of your practice. If you are a samatha yogi, will you be able to maintain your nimitta when you go to that stupa with so many people? Of course not. Even if you are doing open awareness, you go there, you might just be distracted by all these things that are happening there. Finally, asammoha. Asammoha is a non-delusion. Non-delusion means that when you see this intention arising within you, you can see that it was not I who made this intention. This intention arose because of cause and condition. Why did this thought arise that you want to go to the stupa? Maybe you saw a photograph of a stupa that was the catalyst for the thought to arise to want to actually visit the stupa. Maybe you heard somebody talk about the wonderful experience after having visited the stupa, and that could have influenced you to want a similar experience. So you can see that that is also not me, not mine, not myself. It comes about because of cause and condition. And if it is suitable, there's no ceremony there, no festival there, and it's a very nice, quiet, beautiful, inspiring stupa, and you go there. As you go there also, you do so with full awareness, knowing that there's no one who is going, but they are all a combination of causes and conditions connected to this psycho-physical entity. It's always in a process of change. This is how the commentary explains it. But I have also made use of this, made an acronym out of this called the bar test to make it easier for people to keep in mind. Whenever a thought, a feeling or a perception that makes you intend to do something, you should look back at it and investigate and put it to the bar test. What does B stand for? B is whether it is beneficial. You have an intention to do something. Is it beneficial? Whether you are a yogi or whether you're a layperson, whether you're talking about spiritual practice or you're talking about worldly tasks, you can still apply this bar test, but with different value system. Value system for spiritual practice is one, and the value system for relationships, for jobs, and for business is another. The system, the values may differ, but this procedure of investigation is the same. So the first thing you need to do is to look back at the intention and investigate to see whether it is beneficial or not. Beneficial to you from our Buddhist values means that it is not harmful to you or to others. Even if you are involved in a business deal, from the Buddhist perspective, you are supposed to have to engage in right livelihood, which means that whatever you do to earn a living, you should not harm yourself or harm others. Do not break your precepts or cause others to break their precepts. So if it passes the first test, B, beneficial, then you go on to the next one. Is it appropriate? It may be beneficial, but it may not be appropriate. For example, in a retreat situation like this, We all know that reading Dharma books, relevant Dharma books, can be very good because it widens our knowledge and may help us to practice more efficiently. We also know that Dharma discussion is good because it helps us to clarify our doubts and to learn from other people's experience, other people's intelligence and wisdom. But it may not be appropriate to do so in a retreat situation like that, because the rules of the retreat are that you're supposed to restrict conversations, keep to yourself, try to understand your mind rather than to socialize with people. So although it's beneficial, it's not appropriate. So you can cut it off. No need to think further. Maybe it's appropriate because you are not talking to another yogi. Maybe you want to discuss with your teacher during interview time. Okay, that's good. So it's beneficial and it's appropriate because you're talking to your teacher. You're not talking to yogis and you're not disturbing their practice. However, the next test is whether it's relevant. Is it relevant to the practice here? If it's not relevant to the practice, you could ask me whether UFOs exist or not. What do you think about UFOs? What do you think about this and that? This is not relevant to your practice. Although it's good to have another person's point of view about certain things, you must ask the right questions at the right time. Or it may be something relevant to your practice, but it's at the wrong time. So also you cannot ask. Your intentions must be properly investigated from various angles. Relevance also means that you have to be continuous and persistent in what you do. If it is relevant, it is within your domain, then you go ahead and do it. But are you continuous about it? Are you persistent in doing that? Or do you give up easily? So that's another aspect of it. Relevance means it relates to what you're doing, and it also means that you are persistent about it, persevering about it, not giving up easily. Finally, the last one is realistic. We have already talked about non-delusion. Being realistic in the ultimate sense means seeing things in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta and conditionality. That's in the ultimate sense. In the worldly sense, being realistic has two aspects. One is whether it is factual or not, or whether it's only hearsay, or it's only your own suspicions. If it's only your own suspicions, you must be extra careful. Don't simply judge another person or say something that might offend another person based on your suspicions and unverified information. Often we tend to be very judgmental on other people. When we see them behave in a certain way that we do not approve of, then we start to comment in a negative way. We assume that that person doesn't have good reason to do what he or she is doing. But that's only an assumption. You wouldn't know what actually happened. There's one story that was told, I think, by an imam. He says that there was this man who was traveling in a bus. And then in the bus, there was this woman with a child. Not a baby, maybe a young kid. And that young kid was crying the whole time. So this guy was sitting in the bus and he was he was very upset, very judgmental. He says, how can this lady allow her child to make so much noise in a public place like this? She should do something to the son. He was full of negative comments about the lady. Until later, he found out that the father had just died in an accident. And the poor child was crying because of that. When he heard that, then he felt very sorry. Oftentimes, we judge first. And we find out that our judgments are based on inaccurate or false information, or just suspicions which do not have any basis at all. And this happens especially among people who are very close to you. When they get very close to a person, each knows each other's strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes we tend to be over-judgmental based on our own assumptions. So one has to be really careful before we say anything, judge the other person. The second aspect of being realistic is whether the intention you have, the idea that you have in your mind, is actually workable. Is it feasible? Is it workable? So you have to think of that carefully before you pursue that idea. That's a bar test that I often like to remind people. And it's really very useful in whatever you do, whether it's spiritual or worldly. If you can apply the bar test, it will stand you in good stead. But the bar test can only work if there is Sati, if there is mindfulness, if you are able to catch that intention before you get caught up in your ideas. Right? If you don't have enough mindfulness, you won't have time to actually investigate. You're already in there, and you already said something, you already done something, you already made a decision without proper consideration. And that could bring you a lot of suffering later on. Now, in the course of our practice, quite a lot of yogis also ask, they said that there's some issue that keeps on appearing in their minds. And they already know why it is like that. Because of clinging to certain ideas or expectations. But still, one cannot let go. Why is that so? That's because we have not really understood it deep down in our hearts. We only understood it intellectually. So we have to keep on looking and looking. Every time it happens, you have to look at it again and again. Every time you suffer, really feel and experience the suffering and link it to the cause. You have to do that again and again and again, and finally you'll come to your senses. You know, when wisdom arises, the wisdom will tell you, hey, why don't you just let go of this? And that's the end. But because wisdom has not really had the proper conditions, it cannot arise. So that's why I say, don't be in a hurry. And Sayadaw Tejaniya says that you cannot solve the problem. It is not you who solves the problem, but it is wisdom that solves the problem. And wisdom is not something that belongs to you. It arises because the causes and conditions are there. So the only thing you can do is to create the causes and conditions that will bring about wisdom. And what are the causes and conditions? Continuous mindfulness. Remembering all the things that have been taught to you, reminding yourself to put it into practice, and looking back continuously to try to verify that. Actually, it's so simple. Desire is the cause of suffering. Full stop. That's all. If you really look in your mind, everything that you do is motivated by desire. So it's a matter of calculating the payoff. You want to pursue this desire? Okay. But are you willing to undergo all the suffering? So if you've had enough of it, you already realize it, then you will put on the brakes. If not, you just go on and do it. Suffer. And then you'll learn your lesson in time. Some people said also that it's very difficult if you want to restrain yourself. That's also suffering. That's true. Restraining yourself is also suffering. But it depends on what sort of restraint that you want to do. If you restrain yourself in order to observe the 5 precepts, or to observe the 10 types of sucharita, of good conduct, that's very wholesome. The 10 types of sucharita are refraining from 3 for 3, 3 connected with your bodily actions, 4 connected with speech, and 3 connected with the mind. These 10 are really quite gross. But if it's something quite subtle and doesn't break any of these precepts or any of these causes of good conduct, it's okay, not too bad. For example, you like to eat a certain food. Then you have to ask yourself, why do you want to restrain yourself? Because greed is not good. Of course, nobody can be free from greed unless you're an arahant. Yeah, you can't be free from desire unless you're an arahant. So you cannot say that, oh, I want to cut off desire. So this desire to eat, I don't want to eat. This desire to go to the toilet, I don't want to go to the toilet. The desire to change to new clothes, I don't want to change to new clothes. You can't do that. You have, if it is something, for example, you like a certain food, and there's a desire for it, okay, go. You're not breaking any precept, you're not stealing the food. Go and have as much as you want. See how much you can have. Look at how much suffering it costs you by indulging in it. That's the way to learn. Not to simply restrain because it's unwholesome. Because it's not so easy. When you look at the spectrum of greed, hatred and delusion, it's from very subtle low end to a very gross high end. Very subtle low end greed is just liking a cup of tea, liking a certain color to another, a preference for one to another. Even liking nature, liking to walk in nature, that's also greed. How can you go without greed? If you really enjoy, you try to enjoy it and really see if the enjoyment lasts. After some time, you will see that you don't want to stand and sit and watch the sunset every evening. If you don't break the precepts, if you don't commit any of the 10 types of unwholesome causes of action, even though it is subtle unwholesome states of mind and you realize it, investigate to see why is it unwholesome. If it's really unwholesome, then it has unwholesome results. Don't just accept on hearsay. Investigate for yourself. Okay, let me stop here. Any questions? Yes. So let me repeat the question. Last time I said that the mind must have a certain degree of composure before you can start to investigate. And so now you're asking me how it is related to samatha and vipassana, and what constitutes a composed mind. Well, the definition of samadhi is literally, it means properly bring and place the mind wherever you want it to, wherever you want to place. Which means to say that if you are not able to control your mind and your mind is distracted by all sorts of thoughts and objects, that's not samadhi. When you have many objects coming and going, and yet you are unruffled, thoughts may come and go, objects may come and go, there may be the toad or the frog croaking away, the cicada screeching away, people talking, vehicles going and coming, but it doesn't disrupt you. It does not make you unsettled. And your mind is still clear. All these are just objects coming and going. Thoughts come and go. You are not distracted by them. You are not dragged by thoughts, particularly those thoughts that have a lot of emotions. Now that's when you are composed. If you feel that you are composed, and then a thought that is full of emotion arises, and it's just you, not ready yet. Okay, if you are able to step back, calmly and look at things come and go, that's the time when you can investigate. it does not necessarily mean that you are absorbed and focused into one single object. In fact, if you are fully absorbed in one single object, you can't do any investigation. Investigation is about how things connect with one another. If you're absorbed in an object, you don't know any other thing, what is there to connect to? So that's why in this open awareness, I always say that the sort of composure or samadhi that arises is a dynamic samadhi. It is a composure that comes out of wisdom, seeing that things are coming and going all the time, and that's their nature, so you're not bothered. It's okay. Whereas if you do that static samadhi, the focused awareness, that you absorb into the object, you cannot tolerate disturbances because they bring you out of your cocoon.
Bhante, following from her thing, what happens if there are many views proposed to you and you have to make a decision? It's not that there are many objects, but different views.
Okay, what if there are many different views proposed to you and you have to make a decision? Well, these are also different objects. They are just conceptual objects. That is part of life. That is the suffering of life, having to make decisions. Making decisions is one of the greatest sufferings in life, you know. You can't run away from that. And in order to make a good decision, make sure that your mind is composed. If it's not composed, then you will be influenced by biases and prejudices and emotions. There are many views, and you feel that they are very daunting and very complicated. Don't go and think about them yet. Go and meditate first, compose your mind, and then when your faculties are clear, then you can look at it.
Earlier on, you were deciding whether to come here or think, because it's going to rain. So you stood there for a while, deciding what to do.
So finally, who tossed the coin?
Finally, I think majority means that let's go to the home. No, but actually, you make a good decision. You look at the sky and say, it's not overcast. Even if rain, don't be very heavy.
Yeah, okay, good. I was also undecided down there. I was looking up where are the lights, here or there. Yes.
Is it true that when you have a composed, you can fall asleep easily with lights and sound on? When, let's say, TV is on, the light is on, you can still fall asleep.
With a composed mind. Yeah, why not? Or you may not fall asleep. You may be so composed and so mindful that you have a good rest. You have a good rest, but you're mindful. Why is it that people cannot rest when all these things are happening? Because they are thinking, they shouldn't do this, stop the light. Don't you know that I want to sleep? Why is the television still on? All these things are preventing you from sleeping. If you say, okay, it's alright. If you're tired, you will go to sleep. Anyone else? No? Okay, so enough for tonight.